So, Emily, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored to have you on the show today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you're up to today?
So about me, I'm a toddler mom and also expecting another one in February. So I'm about 15 weeks along.
Cool.
Um, I am a mom blogger, and I tend to share just about our daily life, my mental health story and journey. And I have a background in education, so I tend to share
Mm,
tips and tricks and help parents along the way with that also, because,
cool.
yeah.
Because, yeah.
Um, just because I realized that I had all this information that I figured was common knowledge. And after talking to a few of my mom friends, they had no idea why I did all these things with my daughter.
hmm
So I started sharing them with everyone.
Cool. And what has that evolved into for you?
Um, it's evolved into, I have like a whole insiders list on Instagram, where I share extra tips and tricks for them. And I just kind of, I share a lot of our everyday little play, um, that some people probably have no idea why I did it. And I try to explain why and just kind of um, show how much play is learning and
Yeah,
easy ways to help your child develop.
cool. And so, what would you say redefining motherhood? What does redefining motherhood mean for you, and how have you experienced that on your journey so far?
Um, I think for me, the biggest part was blogging opened me up to a whole community of moms. Um, and they are so supportive, and sharing your story and learning their stories totally just builds you up. And
hmm
um, knowing that you're not alone a lot of the times, even though in motherhood you feel so lonely.
hmm
Um, but there's so many moms around the world, um, between in your same town to across the world in like Australia.
hmm
Moms are all experiencing almost the same thing as you. So it's wild.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's one of those things where we almost have to really pay attention to it because there's this weird dynamic that happens where we are like in the moment it's like, okay, this is only happening to me. No one has ever experienced this, so I can't, for me anyways, it was like, what am I doing wrong? Can't ask for help. To kind of unlocking that and going, oh, wait a minute, like I am not the only one. And there are so many resources out there in just talking and breaking down that shame that can keep us so trapped in our everyday, I'll say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I recently shared about intrusive thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of messages from moms saying, I thought I was the only one to ever think these things. It was
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming. And I'm just like, you're definitely not alone. Like, I've had these
Mm-hmm.
thoughts for years, um, before motherhood, but in motherhood too. And they're just like, they're so scary. And I thought I was the only one. And I was so ashamed, but I'm like, don't be. And like, just for them to hear that someone else goes
Mm-hmm.
through it, it was so comforting for them. So it was really nice. Like, and that's why I try to share all this stuff.
Well, and it normalizes the thoughts that they're not the only ones thinking those. And I think as soon as we can normalize something as intense of those intrusive thoughts, then we're in a better position to say, okay, so I can be curious now. And so how are you moving through that? And what did you do differently that helped you get through that? Which I'm sure some of those conversations led into.
Definitely they did. Yeah.
So, if you're open to it, how have you become who you are today? How have you been managing your journey of motherhood? And what was one of those biggest moments for you where you were like, okay, it's time to start talking because I'm not the only one?
Um, I think once I found my like community on Instagram, which I add to it every day, um, there's a few other people that I follow and they've started sharing, and I'm like, if they can do it,
Mm,
I can do it.
hmm
Um, and I just felt like the need to share, because I would have the conversation with them after in private and be like, I can't believe you shared that. And then I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to try it, press send, upload, whatever, and just wait for it. see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. And
Mm-hmm.
I never regretted it.
And so, what would you say to a mom who is kind of watching your journey or is feeling like they've got something to share? And we talked about this just before we hit record, that this is definitely a passion for you. This is something that you are doing because this is really coming through you, right? This is something that you are feeling pulled to share and to connect with the Instagram community. And so if a mom is also feeling that, like what would be your words of wisdom and to get her started on sharing her story?
I tell her to go for it. She can full out reach out to me. I'm always willing to help share advice, any information that I have. But honestly, just putting it out there. I've even noticed my friends who aren't bloggers, but I think
Mm-hmm.
they read my stuff often,
Mm-hmm.
that they're putting a little bit more detail and will share more on their social media, because they're like, listen, like, this is what's happening. Like, everything's not sunshine and rainbows all the time. Or, you know, it was just a really hard day for us. Or
Mm-hmm.
we do share the positives too, but everything isn't always positive. And I think a lot of people are really realizing that now, and
Yeah.
just kind of, it's easier to share when more people are sharing
Right.
the entire picture.
The entire picture. So true. It's so true. And I think for us, to be honest, it's one of those things of navigating how much I can share and what feels good, what feels safe to share. So, how do you navigate that part?
um it's definitely hard. Sometimes I will sit on stuff for a few months, but I tend to write, if something big happens, I usually write it down right away, and that's part of my process to kind of heal
Mm,
from it and just kind of work it out. And then sometimes I'll sit on it for a couple days, or it could be weeks or months, and then I eventually
mm,
share. Some of it I still haven't shared, but
yeah,
I think it's just when you're comfortable and when you're ready to tell that story.
right.
I think a lot of it I did share after I did a lot of therapy, so that
Okay.
helped too.
See, and I just love that you went there because I'm going, I think so much of our journey is reaching out and getting the support and doing the therapy because, yes, we are showing so much of our lives now on social media. And I think it is so important to acknowledge that we are getting help outside. Like, we're not just showing up on Instagram being like, yep, I figured this all out and now I'm good to go. It's like, no, like I asked for help and I've had the conversations and I've dug real deep to get into these parts of myself. And that is like so important. So can you share that with us? Because I think for moms listening, if they haven't yet explored that world, because I think it can be super scary.
Oh yeah.
Right. Um, and I have lots of beliefs on that, but let's hear, like, for you, how did you kind of make that connection that it was time?
So for me, um, anxiety and depression isn't new. So we had known, like my health team had known to be cautious of me for postpartum depression and anxiety. Um, so it was always in the back of my head, and they would check in on me with our well baby appointments for my daughter. There was always a social worker, so she would check in,
Mm,
and they had me do an after baby group, because luckily at that time there wasn't COVID.
yes,
So we could
absolutely.
meet up in person. We did that once a week for a little while. So that was
Mhm.
helpful. But I think when she was around 8 months, she wasn't sleeping.
Mhm.
Babies don't always sleep how everyone
Mhm.
says they do.
Mhm.
And I was really struggling, and I finally admitted to my husband um, all these feelings and thoughts going on. And I just knew that I wasn't managing on my own anymore.
Mhm.
So I made phone call after phone call to my doctor, the social worker, and
Mhm.
said, what are my options? And they got me into a cognitive behavioral therapy program,
Cool.
which it took a little while to set up just because there were some bumps in the road. But once that started, I actually got to do it virtually. So
Okay.
I didn't have to travel. It was the winter.
Yeah.
So it was perfect. And I didn't have to worry about childcare. Um,
Mhm.
so it was really good. I somehow got lucky and found a team that was willing to work with all of the struggles.
Cool.
Um, and then I did the therapy. It was a short program for about 12 weeks, and
Mm-hmm.
then follow up if I need to. And I
Mm-hmm.
also did end up choosing to go on medication as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I was going to say, what did you do between asking for help and then getting into that program? Because I find like that, I think we've come a long way in how we're helping people with mental and emotional well-being. And I know from my days in social work, there was always that waiting. And so I was just going to ask, what did you do in the waiting term? And you went on medication. And so that's where you get that relief of being like, okay, now I can take the pressure off and I can step back, and then get the tools and the strategies to continue to navigate. Right.
Yeah, the waiting was really hard and I was getting really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm not one to back down, and I will call and harass and get things done if it's something I really want. And I knew that this needed to happen. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, the system is not failing me. We are doing this.
Right.
I actually didn't start the meds until after therapy started because it wasn't,
Okay.
um, I didn't want to try it yet. I've been on meds before. I don't have anything
Okay.
against them, but I really wanted to try not to.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew it wasn't getting much better. And I think 2 or 3 weeks into therapy, I was like, okay, let's pair them up and let's do
Yeah.
this.
Right. Right. What do you think was the biggest, or the most significant thing you learned in the therapy that you still use today, or that maybe has just really become a way of being?
Um, so with CBT, it's a lot different than any other therapy that I've done before. Um, and you basically like retrain your brain and your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I use it all the time now. And I even kind of like play it on my friends. That anxiety is basically lying to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I use still a lot of the different exercises, and I recommend the 2 books all the time to friends and other people that bring up that they also have anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
or depression. And it's really just like, it really helps when I actually stop and think and be like, okay, is this thought that I'm having actually true? Is there any evidence to actually make it true? And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it's not. And then I'm like, okay, see, move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I typically will do, it got to a point for me in my world, or my experience with anxiety was, if there wasn't a bear chasing me, I'm making it all up. Like, I literally have no evidence to suggest any of the stories I'm telling myself. So I had to just like have that visual representation, and it probably seems extreme, but it was one of those things where it was like, no, like that story I'm telling myself is based on old programs, old thoughts, most likely generational things handed down, and it's not true. And I remember calling my coach and being like, do you think about this on this occasion? And she's like, no. I was like, okay, so that's a me thing. She's like, that's a you thing. And it's like, okay, so then I can just break that apart, because that's not true. That is not real. And I would say that like those reframing and rewiring, just, it's like this confidence to detach what's not true and get closer into alignment and who I am and like what I'm capable of without the fear. Right.
Totally. Yeah.
You said you always recommend 2 books. What were they?
So the one is Mind Over Mood, and the
Mm-hmm.
other is, I think it's just the Generalized Anxiety Disorder,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something like that. I can send it
Yeah.
to you if you wanted to put in the notes.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And so in this work, I think CBT, I'm also trained in NLP. I'm not trained in CBT, I should say. I'm familiar with it. But NLP for me has become this way of living, this way of being, this way of really knowing my personal power and stepping into that. And I find that that has been such a powerful way to raise my daughter. So have you found that CBT in that way of kind of rewiring the thoughts has helped in how you raise your daughter too?
Um,
Or it's daughter, right? Oh my
yeah,
goodness. I
yeah,
just made that assumption,
yeah.
but I'm like, I'm pretty sure.
It is, yeah. And I'm sure you probably just noticed from Instagram, and
Yeah, I do. Cause
it's
I was like,
already
wait a
there.
minute. How do I know that is true? Right? There
Yeah.
we go.
Um, yeah. Um, I don't think anything as of yet, like to
Mm-hmm.
do with her, like specifically. I mean, it has changed my parenting and that I am not super anxious.
Yeah, that's what I
And
mean. Like the
I'm
role
more
of
laid back.
parent. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I haven't like taught her anything yet. But yeah, I'm pretty relaxed anyway, coming from
Mhm,
an education background and
mhm,
being an early childhood educator. I know
cool.
what kids are capable of, and I'm more of a learn through your own like natural consequences. So I
Yes.
already sat back, but I definitely, there was a big shift when she was younger,
Mhm,
because I had more anxiety then,
mm,
with SIDS and all that. I was always freaking out
mm.
about sleep, but I definitely, it got easier once she got older and I had therapy under my belt.
So you said she was about 8 months. That's when you reached out. And then
Yeah,
from that point on, did she start sleeping? Did you try something different?
she did. We attempted sleep training again, um, and it actually worked the first
Mhm.
night
Oh,
after
wow.
her first wake up. I was like, oh, so she didn't actually need feedings every hour.
I
She just
know.
wanted me. But yeah, the first night, I think she like whimpered and cried for 10 minutes. And then the second time she got up, it was like 10 seconds.
Wow.
And then, yep. And then she slept through the night since then.
So how old was she when she started doing that?
um, in between 8 and 9 months. So I
Yeah,
had
me
started the
too.
sleep training in between, waiting for therapy.
Okay. And how soon after her sleeping through the night did you sleep through the night?
Um, I don't know if I've ever slept through the
Slept through
night.
the night. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now
But did
being
you get
pregnant again.
better? Yeah, right. Did you get better quality of sleep? Like, did you find that sleeping helped a lot more with managing everything?
Oh, I think so for sure. I was definitely more rested. Um, but yeah, sleep has never been good for me anyways, but not having to actually get out of the bed and do something definitely helps.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I found that when we were co-sleeping probably from her newborn days to 6 months old, and then we put her in her own room, but then that just resulted in me going in her room and sleeping on the chair and
Yeah.
then leaving my bed. So then that's when things really started to go downhill for me. And I've said this before in one of the shows, but when my friend said to me that sleep deprivation was a form of torture, I just was like, sorry, what? That was one of those like bear moments where it was like, unless there's a bear chasing you, like I was like, sorry, what? Like, but then like so what do you mean? And it was like, it finally took so much pressure off of me that like I wasn't doing something wrong. I was actually physically not like regulating my body because I was not sleeping ever. I had to buy a Fitbit to kind of go, where am I in my sleep? Like, am I sleeping? Do I get into a deep sleep? And learning so much about sleep in terms of how, like what she needed. And then we did some sleep training around 9 months old. And then I think it was the second night after I did have a better quality sleep for sure.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I was so resistant to. And then when my friend also said to me, it like helps with emotional regulation and just like, she's going to be okay. We learned so much about her. We're like, oh, like she needs sleep more than me. Like
Yeah.
just her personality. Cause I think every kid is totally different. Right. Um, I have friends whose kids like they only need 8 or 6 hours of sleep and they're totally fine. We found with her she wasn't and she needed it. And it was like I just remember learning so much about the education that it just really set us free from getting to know our daughter instead of what everybody else expected of the kid. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
And I remember going to my doctor's appointment and losing it. And she was like, yeah, I think we need to dive into this. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I'm not sleeping. I don't know anybody else that like, I'm not sleeping.
Yeah.
How come no one told me that I would like everyone says, oh, you're not going to lose sleep, but they didn't say when you don't sleep, you're not going to feel like yourself. You know, there's those parts too. So
Yeah.
that was a really big turning point for us in our kind of becoming, I'll say.
Hmm.
So with your second, what are your plans in terms of keeping yourself, good and aligned with what you need to be good?
I think this time I won't be as anxious, and as long as I'm awake, I'll probably let for swing naps and probably more
Sorry,
baby
say
weight,
that again. Say
like
that
the
again.
swing naps. So
Yeah, I wouldn't do it either.
I
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
do
do
it.
it.
I was too, unless I was like wide awake staring at her, I wouldn't do it.
Oh my
So
gosh, I was
I
the
think
same.
I might allow them. We'll see how it
Mhm.
goes.
Mhm.
But I might allow it, and probably a lot more baby wearing. But
Mm.
I'm definitely gonna try to do good sleep habits right from the beginning if I can.
Right. Right.
Um, and then if things go south, I'll probably just ask for help this time around
Mhm.
rather than not, because it took me quite a long time to ask for help. I ask for it now, but I didn't for a
Mhm.
while.
Yeah.
And I think I just need to like swallow that pride, and it takes a village.
It does. And not even swallow the pride, but like receive. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part in motherhood, right? Because we're constantly giving, 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 giving. Like we're responsible for a little human and it takes a lot of us. And I think asking for help is like that opportunity to receive without all of the judgment that comes along with what does it mean if I ask for help? And what does it mean if I can't do it all? Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And if you have the help, take it. If
Mm-hmm.
people are willing to give you help, and um, just take it, is
Yeah,
what
that's
I like want to tell everyone. Take the help if anyone offers it.
right. I typically ask all the moms on the show, if you could go back and ask or tell your younger mom self what would want her to know, what would it be? And almost every single mom has said to ask for help, right?
That's so funny. Yeah, but I think it's so important.
It's so important. And so that's what, for me, redefining motherhood has been, how do we break down the barriers that are in place of us not taking the help? And what's getting in the way of that? And I think for what I'm hearing you say has just been like, I won't even say that. For me, it was, I can just do it all because I didn't know any other way. This is just, you just do it all, right? And you
Yeah,
exhaust yourself and you do it all.
that's 100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
And then I started to think about it and I was like, well, you know what? Like, in order to continue moving my business forward and, contributing into my life, contribution into my life, I want to do the things that bring me joy. And I can't do that if I'm constantly giving to her. So things had to change, right?
Yeah.
And asking for help. But I think there's this really big difference between like the maintenance of learning, the new ways, like, so the CBT and the therapy, you can learn it, but not maintaining it is tough, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
took a little while in the beginning, but then I'm like, okay, no, but that's proven to work. you
Yeah.
have you have that experience to know it works, so keep doing it. And
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. So if you were to tell us about, what are with your blog and your Instagram, what can moms find when they show up on your page? What are your intentions and what are you hoping to bring into the world of motherhood?
um I'm definitely not your typical mom blogger or Instagram blogger that everything is picture perfect. Um, Most times I don't even, like today my hair is done. Usually it's up in a bun that's probably been there for at least 2 days, if not more.
Mhm.
Um, and that's how I basically always am in my stories, sharing my daily life. And then, but what you can typically find is um, honest, raw stories
Mhm.
on how I'm feeling. Um, I definitely don't really hold back. Sometimes I do post a trigger warning just in case,
Yeah.
but I don't tend to do a lot of those. And if I do, they're on the blog just so that you have to basically make the active choice to go and read
Right.
it.
Yes.
And it's
Right.
not in your face.
Right.
And then I've kind of lost where the question was.
That's okay. That's okay. If moms were looking to connect with you or follow, what can they expect when they show
um,
up on your page?
Yeah, so basically everything I just said, and then I also share, and I think I mentioned this before, the activities and things to do with your littles and kind of why. Um, I speak a lot on toy rotation.
Mhm.
Um, I get so many messages. They're like, I'm actually trying it and it's so amazing. And I'm like, I told you 5 months ago, but I'm glad you're trying it out.
Okay, so tell us about why toy rotation, because I understand it, but like very minimally. I'm not an educator by any means, but tell us why.
So toy rotation, less is more when it comes to toys. If your toy room, or wherever your kids play, all the toys are out all the time, it's overwhelming, and you probably notice that your kids play for a short amount of time and they're bored.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find storage, a closet, wherever, and put most of the toys away and leave out a few,
Mm-hmm.
you'll probably find that your child plays longer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and their play is kind of more developed,
Mm-hmm.
that they'll do more with the toys because they have to get more creative and use their imagination, which is why, and I notice that with my daughter. I also notice if the room is clean and
Mm-hmm.
like put away and she goes into it, she plays, rather than if we've left it a mess and she goes back in, it's
Right.
too much and she doesn't play also. So cleaning the toy room and having less out definitely, is it's just better for the kids. They end up actually playing, and I see a lot more independent play with
Oh,
my
that's what
daughter.
I was
Yeah,
just gonna ask. I'm like, teach
it's a
me how
lot.
to be independent play.
So that's how I find it. I mean, she's 18 months and she
Right.
plays by herself quite a lot, but you also have to remember that children won't know how to play until you show them. So
Yes,
I've done a lot of
definitely.
modeling, and I
Yes.
sit there on the floor with her, and then I kind of let her go off on her own and then
Mm-hmm.
step in if I need to. The
So
other
like
thing,
letting her lead, right? So
yeah,
letting her lead. Yeah. Okay. And then I've also been trying like play beside her, like play on my own.
yeah,
Yeah. And just kind of give her the space, but not like leave the room kind of thing.
totally. Like I never really leave the room. I mean, they're up on the couch or on the floor beside her. But then
Right.
the other thing to remember with the toy rotation is, um, like their interests. So
Okay.
whatever your child's interested in, have some of that out and kind of add on to it. So if they're interested in, my one friend, her daughter's obsessed with Barbies, so I gave her
Mhm.
like a list of 10 activities or things she could add on to the Barbies, like giving them a bath, like stuff
Mhm.
like that, just to like deepen it and do more things rather than just dress the Barbies up all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be so cool. I don't know if you saw it on the weekend because I did it on the weekend, but we just reorganized our playroom upstairs, actually, and my playroom downstairs. And I'm looking at it going, I think there's still too much. Like I definitely took some off, but it would be so cool to have you look at even one of our listeners, like, and redesign it and like share. Cause I think, cause like what you said, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And the way you look at things compared to, you know, a mom who's not an educator in all of those or isn't in like following all those things. I just think what you don't know. And it'd be
For
really cool
sure.
to have those ideas around toy rotation and stuff like that. So definitely if our listeners are looking for that, I know I am always.
Totally. I would love to.
That would be a really cool opportunity. So it's like they could send in a picture of what they've got going on and what their kids are. And it would really be cool for you to jump in on one of our stories and share about, you know, some of those recommendations. I think that would be so helpful. Because my biggest thing when I'm working with moms is they want time, right?
Yeah.
And I know for me, it's like I want to be present with my daughter and I also want her to be independent. So it's like this harmony of like, here's how we do this. Let me model that for you. And then I'm going to like inch away
Yep.
every, you know, little bit at a
Exactly. Yeah.
time.
That's totally
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Yeah. But then I don't want to like tell you what to do. I want you to explore your environment. She's at a daycare that is focused on the, I don't know if I'll say it right, but the Reggio Emilia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and then since with COVID, they've had to really reconstruct, you know,
Oh
how
yeah. It's so hard. Yeah.
so it's like this beautiful daycare and there's a lot of plastic in there, which is like really not the approach, but you know, they are behavioral flexibility. They're meeting it where it needs to be. And I just really love that approach and trying to kind of stimulate that here in
Hmm.
her room. But yeah, you
Totally.
just don't know what you don't know. So that'd be really cool. I think that
Yeah.
would be a fun way
I'd like
to
to do that.
I'm like getting this idea as we're talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool. Because how many of us are, you know, kind of stuck between, I know like we get gifts and it's plastic. And I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
like I love plastic. Like I love the intention behind it, but
Yeah, I totally feel you. I've actually for Christmas this year, because last year everyone asked us what like she wanted for Christmas, and I'm like, and I had to give everyone each an individual list. So this year I made a registry, like, or a wish list on Amazon, and I sent it out, and I'm like, here's 1,000,001 things that we eventually want for her. Choose something off of there, and I don't have to pick and choose like, oh, I'll tell this family member this and this family member that. I'm like, no, you all have the same list. It'll get checked off when you buy it, and hopefully they stick to it. But
oh my gosh, I just
it's
got
hard.
another really cool. It is. We did the same thing last year. We did it on Toys R Us, and I was like really intentional about what we bought. I wanted it to be, you know, intriguing, and I wanted it to last kind of not like just for a certain amount of time. And then for her birthday, I was like, everyone's like, what can I get her? I'm like, you can donate to her like education account or her creative account, whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
And, or buy us a wood toy. Cause that will, no matter what, if it ends up in the environment, it can, you know, it can be in the natural environment. And so that went really, really well. But it's, I just feel like there's so much that you can share with us, and I would love to have that. So, yeah, if people want to find you and ask you questions about how to do toy rotation and jump into all of that, where can they find you?
They can find me at Life with Mama B on Instagram. That's also my website, lifewithmamab.ca.
Cool.
I did just recently have a name change. I used to be Mama B and Sophie. So if you're looking for me, I think both websites still are up and running.
Okay.
Then I am on Facebook too, but I don't overly use Facebook.
Right. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited, and I have so many ideas to ask you about. So hopefully we can have you back on and share
Definitely
all of that. So thank you so much, love.
No problem. Thank you.